Good evening, and welcome to the last episode of 2022 of Dreary Midnight. Don't know if you can tell by my voice right now, but I'm slightly sick, so I have a wonderful human taking over for me.
Hi.
Devon is back, my lovely fiance. So this is Dreary Midnight. So I'm Lisa, my pronouns are she, they. Devon.
Hi, my name is Devon, and my pronouns are he, him.
And what are we talking about today, Devon?
As you have requested, we are talking about the Christmas Truce.
Woo! Christmas Truce.
Something sort of positive to end the year on.
Yay! We're gonna take a pause so I can open my lunch. Alright. When did the Christmas Truce happen?
Well, you can tell from the name it started around Christmas time.
Really? I thought it was the 4th of July.
Yes. Wrong holiday. Not Christmas in July. So, this is famously an episode that happens at the beginning of World War I. That, of course, starts where a Serbian nationalist shoots the heir apparent Archduke Franz Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then through a lot of complicated politics of Europe in the early 1900s, starts a world war.
All right. Question. So when... That was 1917?
1914.
1914. What time of year in 1914?
This is sometimes called the August Crisis. This kind of happens in June and July, and then the war kicks off in August.
Okay. So it's the summer of 1914, things are starting to kick off.
Yes.
All right. And so is it one of those where like, oh, we'll be done no later than New Year's?
Yeah. I believe there's actually a line from Kaiser Wilhelm II, the Emperor of Germany at the time, where he's giving a speech to rally the troops, and I believe he says something to the effect of, "You'll be back before all the leaves have fallen." So this is sort of the attitude they're going into, like, they will be home before Christmas. And as is often the case in such events, that is not how it works out. They will all be home by Christmas. It'll just be Christmas of 1918 and not 1914.
Yeah. You didn't specify a year. Therefore, if you did not specify the year...
You're not wrong.
But... if they say, you'll be back by the time the leaves are down, and it's kicking off in the summer, that means it's going to take max like 2 months. Or they think it's going to take max like 2 months.
Yeah.
Or maybe 3, depending on when they said that.
Yes.
Anyway, so, again, strictly speaking, they were home around the time the leaves are on the ground, but not that same year.
Yes. Give it about 4 years.
Yeah. So it's winter of 1914 is when this is taking place, the Christmas Truce.
Yes. This is mostly happening on what we call the Western Front. So this is sort of Germany, Belgium, and France. And the British also have troops fighting alongside the French. This is kind of where that's happening. So how we get into the situation we're in for the Christmas Truce is... Germany wants to knock France out of the war. Mm-hmm. And, of course, France doesn't want this to happen, so there's a ton of fortifications along their border with Germany. Mm. So Germany decides, we can just avoid those fortifications by invading Belgium and sneaking around the French fortifications from the north.
So do a kind of an up and around situation.
Yeah. And this is called the Schlieffen Plan, named after the former head of the German army, Alfred von Schlieffen.
That is such an aggressively German name.
Yes, it is a very aggressively German name. So they do this, and of course, famously, there's a big international treaty in Europe where everyone considers Belgium neutral.
Okay.
Mostly France, Germany, and the United Kingdom.
Wait, so they... force them to break the neutrality?
Yes. So the Germans decided it's not worth it. We're going to invade Belgium. We can win the war against France.
Okay.
But, of course, then people in Britain who want to go to war with Germany use that as a justification for entering the war. So now Germany's at war with not just France on the Western Front, but also Belgium and Britain.
Huh.
As you do.
Yeah.
And their plan almost kind of succeeds. They're getting close to Paris. But then they get to the Marne, which is this area with a lot of rivers in that part of France. And the French army is able to dig in and push them back. And then it's kind of the weather's getting too bad to try to retake Paris.
Okay.
So then they do this thing called the Race to the Sea.
Okay.
Where the Germans are like, oh, well, we can't take Paris, but we can take all these ports in Belgium and France, and then the British can't use them to land troops and supplies. And we can use them to, send out ships to raid the British coast.
Okay.
So
and this is, towards the English Channel area?
Yeah, this is, so I got this book because it has a map of there.
Okay.
And that's where the front lines end up stopping in November when they kind of stop their advance.
Okay, so it is just west of Brussels and Antwerp and The Hague.
Yeah.
Yeah, by a couple miles. Switzerland's not in it, but it's the line is...
all the way to their border.
Yeah, but if the line were to extend, it would be run straight through Bern. For those who know where that is. It's not quite at Belfort in Germany, but almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of where things are settling in. So this is kind of what has happened. So you've had several months of very brutal fighting. So then you have the Christmas Truce. This is mostly taking place on December the 24th to the 25th. So the anniversary will be over the weekend. So timing.
Hey, it wasn't like that was intentional.
So I'm just going to kind of skim through the summary from Encyclopedia Britannica. I think it's a good overview.
Okay.
So it's an unofficial and impromptu ceasefire that occurred along the Western Front during World War I. The pause in fighting was not universally observed, nor had it been sanctioned by higher commanders on either side. But along some 2/3 of the 30-mile, or for our non-American viewers, 48-kilometer front, mostly controlled by the British Expeditionary Force, which is the fancy name they gave to all the British troops that are fighting alongside the French. The guns fell silent for a short time. Countries of Europe had, of course, gone to war in the summer of 1914 with enthusiasm and the belief that the conflict would be over by Christmas, the 25th of December of that year. With only a few months, however, hundreds of thousands of soldiers had been killed in heavy fighting. The German advance had been checked at the Marne, and the race to the sea between Germany and the Allies had played out along the First Battle of the Ypres, which is in the coastal area of Belgium. The result was a bloody stalemate with a front that stretched from the Swiss border to the North Sea. In December of 1914, the reality of trench warfare, which is sort of building these giant dugouts that you're fighting each other from,
miles long.
Yes, miles long. Yes, in these horrible, cold and damp trenches. Heavy rain had turned most of the trenches and no man's land, which is the term used for the area between the trenches on either side, to cold and mud. For those of the Western Front, daily life was miserable, but it was a misery that was shared by the enemy, who were in some places separated by no more than 50 yards, or 46 meters, or less.
So it's not even a sports field away.
Yeah, pretty much. You can hear each other if you shout.
Yeah.
So it points out that some of the worst aspects of World War I had not occurred. You don't have the second battle of the Ypres where the use of poison gas occurred. That's still going to happen several months in the future. So you don't have the horrors of gas warfare. You also don't have the famed mindless slaughter of Passchendaele, which is where a lot of British troops die. It's where you...
Hello friends, Editing Lisa here. We had a couple of microphone issues starting at this point, so the audio is going to be a little bit wonky and a little bit different for the rest of the episode. We were able to find an older microphone to use, but just a heads up on the technical issues. Thanks.
Ground.
Okay.
And that's where the poppies come from, because they're the flower that's somewhat common in parts of Flanders, which is the part of Belgium that everyone's kind of fighting in the north there. So that's where you get kind of the poppy as a symbol of remembrance in Britain. But the main takeaway is that hasn't happened yet, and then we haven't had the use of sort of poison gas, so sort of all the famous horrible parts of World War I haven't really kicked off yet.
Okay.
And so going into this early December, there was an attempt made to secure an official truce for the holidays. This was put forward by Pope Benedict the 15th, so that's XV,
Yeah.
who had ascended to the papacy just a month after the outbreak of war, which, worst job in the world.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so we just had to move a whole bunch of things around. So if the audio sounds a bit different, that's why.
Yes.
It's a new microphone or an old microphone. Anyway, so technical difficulties this weekend, I guess. So you were on the Pope and you were quoting the Pope about something.
Yes. So, quoting the Pope, on December 7th, he issued an appeal to the leaders of Europe that the guns may fall silent, at least upon the night the angels sang. Benedict hoped that a truce would allow for the warring parties to negotiate a fair and lasting peace, but there was little interest from the leaders of either side.
I feel like that's very, very common.
Yeah, it's like, we're going to win this war, and then 4 years later, goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
This, of course, did not stop soldiers at the front from seizing initiative when outside events seemed to provide a path for a kind of truce that their leaders had rejected. As December the 25th approached, the constant soaking rain gave way to frost, and the battlefields of Flanders, northern Belgium, were blanketed with light dusting of snow. The German Emperor Wilhelm II contributed to the holiday atmosphere when he sent Tannenbaum, German Christmas trees, to the front in an effort to bolster morale. On December 23rd, German soldiers began placing these trees along their trenches, and they began to sing hymns such as Stille Nacht, or Silent Night, and their voices were later joined from the Allied lines with carols of their own. While there were relatively few British soldiers who spoke German, there were many Germans who had worked in Britain before the war, and this allowed a degree of communication between the two groups. Saxon troops from the Kingdom of Saxony in the German Empire, that's still a region of Germany today. It is just north of the Czech Republic.
Cool.
So that is where that is. In particular, were credited with initiating dialogue with their British opposites. Soldiers on both sides regarded the Saxons as amicable and trustworthy, and the truce had the most success in which British troops were facing Saxon troops. The truce was not widely adopted in the French-controlled sections of the front, as German soldiers had spent 1914 overrunning a huge swath of French territory, and animosity towards the occupiers was very strong. There was also no equivalent to the truce on the Eastern Front, as the Russians were still operating under the Julian calendar, and so the Russian Orthodox Christmas would not occur until what the rest of Europe would consider early January.
Oh yeah, because it's like, what, 11 days offset? Or
Yeah,
like
it's something. It's not quite a month, but it's still pretty major.
Yeah.
By Christmas Eve, some low-ranking British officers had begun ordering their men not to fire unless fired upon. This policy came to be known as live and let live, and it would be adapted on an ad hoc basis throughout the war, particularly in less active sections of the front. Like all implications of live and let live, the officers' decisions were made without any authorization from above, and the tentative truce slowly started to take hold. As morning broke on Christmas Day, German soldiers emerged from their trenches, waving their arms to demonstrate that they had no ill intent. When it became clear that they were not carrying weapons, British soldiers joined them, meeting in no man's lands to socialize and exchange Christmas gifts. Censorship had not yet been fully imposed on letters home, as British soldiers wrote of playing football, to American soccer, and sharing food and drink with men who had just days earlier been their supposed mortal enemies. These accounts stress that men themselves could scarcely believe the remarkable events that were transpiring around them, and that they recognized, even in these moments, their unique and potentially historical significance. All was not frivolous, however, as some of the most common activities in areas observing the truce were joint services to bury the dead, and perhaps recognizing that peace surely could not last, both sides used cease in hostilities to improve and reinforce their defenses. There was some casualties as a result of the non-universal implementation of the truce, and even among units which observed the ceasefire, not all men approved of the decision. Corporal Adolf Hitler, of World War II fame,
Adolf Hitler.
Yes, who worked as a dispatch runner for his regimental headquarters. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he serves in a Bavarian unit, even though he's from Austria. Went as far as forward trenches, sharply criticized the behavior of the men in his regiment, who took the opportunity to join with British troops in no man's land.
So, he's just kind of a lifelong asshat.
Yeah, he's always a buzzkill.
Yeah.
Quote, "Such a thing should not happen in wartime. Have you no sense of German honor?"
I'd say something insulting, but also it's literally Hitler.
So it's just, good to know Hitler was always just a horrible fucking person. Anyway, in the days following Christmas, violence returned to the Western Front, although the truce permitted, in some places, until after New Year's Day. Well, the truce could not have been successful without the endorsement of junior officers on both sides. British and German generals quickly stepped in to prevent any further episodes of fraternization between these men. Still, there were no court-martials or major punishments linked to the events of the Christmas Truce. Senior commanders likely recognized what a potentially disastrous effect that would have on the morale of the men in the trenches. Attempts to revive the truce in Christmas of 1915 were quickly quashed, and there was no subsequent ceasefires of any kind on the Western Front until the final one in November of 1918.
And that's 11/11?
Yeah, that's 11/11, or Armistice Day in England, and what is it, Veterans Day that we have in here in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Yes. It's this sort of crescendo of how attitudes of the common soldiers and the low-level officers change. In the beginning of the war, they're all just kind of doing their job. Unfortunately, it's a job that involves killing people. But it's sort of like, we're all here, this all kind of sucks, we all wish, we were home with our families.
Well, I mean, I just think, their expectation is that they should have been home.
Yeah, at least a week ago.
Yeah, at least a week ago, but they were thinking at least, 6 weeks ago? They thought they should be home by now, but here they are. They're muddy, it's cold, they're dirty. How long has it been since they've seen their beloveds and also had a decent shower that was above 10 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of that camaraderie of, there's a line, there's been movies about this, and there's a one that came out in 2005. It was a joint British-French-German co-production. Yeah. And there's a line where one of the French officers that is part of the fictional truce that occurs in the movie is, I think, talking to his father, who's a general, and he says, I have more in common with those German soldiers across that field than I do with you or any civilian back here sitting in your warm houses, not having to deal with all this.
Yeah. Damn. All right, so any further thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, fear, hopes, dreams?
War is bad.
We knew that. Don't kill people if you can help it.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, happy New Year, and if there's that one asshat just around who you think is probably a garbage person, maybe they just are.
And don't vote for them in an election.
With those due warnings, safe travels home on this dreary midnight.
So if you want to support the show, you can donate on Patreon, patreon.com/drearymidnight. If you want to follow the show on socials, right now we're just on Instagram, at Dreary Midnight Pod. And if you want to send in your own spooky story or other historical event, either email in a voice note telling your spooky story or send a written email with a suggestion, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. And again, don't vote for asshats, and safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.